Thank you very much for joining with us today. And we're happy to show a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon. I'm all backwards this morning, so welcome to KPC. Jetsunma's teaching is entitled The Goal of Pure Intention. And so it was given in 1990, and we will begin now.
I think the subject that we're going to speak about today really isn't so far removed from the children's teaching you just saw me give. These children understand more than anything pure intention. They've really been taught that on a regular basis. It's become part of their thinking and part of their vocabulary. And yet, as adults, this is something that we continually bypass to go on to the greater truths. Students, when they first come to the Dharma, are very impatient, because in the Dharma there is a tremendous insistence on some certain foundational thoughts that must be repeated again and again and again. Particularly in preliminary practice, there are 5 different things that one must accumulate 100,000 times. And with each accumulation, with each session of accumulation, there are certain thoughts that one must go over again and again and again. These thoughts are called the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. And even after one completes Nundro, or preliminary practice, there's never a time, there is never a day that we should be without those thoughts. Until the time that we reach supreme enlightenment, we must assume that we don't have these thoughts down very well. These thoughts, for your information, teach us of the faults of cyclic existence, the problems inherent within cyclic existence, the ones that are not escapable while one remains fixed in cyclic existence. And they are teachings about cause and effect relationships, very important, because these cause and effect relationships, although we think we understand them, we do not understand them according to the way we act. Because we can observe how we act, and we will see that we do not understand them. To learn again and again these cause and effect relationships is absolutely necessary. One cannot practice purely or with any good result without understanding that to produce meritorious activity and to produce virtuous activity, these are the causes of Buddhahood. That meditation, that good conduct, that virtue, that generosity, these things that the Buddha has given us to do, that these things produce enlightenment eventually. And that the habitual tendencies that are so strongly ours, selfishness, lack of generosity, self-absorption, hatred, greed, ignorance, mental arrogance, pride. These things actually produce, a cause and a lower rebirth, a cause that produces a lower rebirth. They are a cause that produces a lower rebirth. And they produce unhappiness continually and consistently, without doubt. This is true to the degree that apple seeds are the only way that you can get apples, and that papaya seeds produce papaya fruits. It is always consistently so. It cannot be changed. these foundational thoughts are really important, but even these come after a certain period of defining one's intention that one should go through, that perhaps is even more subtle than the thoughts that turn the mind. In order to come to the point where one considers practice important, where one considers meditation important, where one considers any kind of spiritual development important, in order to come to the point where one looks at everyday activity, looks at cyclic existence and finds it to be insufficient or inappropriate, one has to go through perhaps a period of evaluation or a period of change that I'm not sure there are any books about. It's a very subtle kind of thing. And at that point, one must have a certain intention. Unfortunately, although this period is extremely important and extremely precious, we shortchange it. We think that it's kind of a baby thing to do. We think that this period isn't precious and isn't important, and let's get on to the real teachings. We want to walk into a Dharma scene and have the master teacher or the Vajra master or the Lhamo or whatever terminology you want to use give us the secrets of the universe. We're all revved up for that. Tell us the big secret. Not realizing that the secrets of the universe, if you want to call them that, or actually the stage of great completion, isn't hidden at all. And it's no secret. Truth is available, relevant, present, and to those whose minds are pure, obvious. So the difficulty that we find in not knowing the great completion state, in not knowing the primordial wisdom nature that is our true nature, in not attaining enlightenment, the difficulty that we have in that area is due to the impurity of our own mind and the lack of our pure perception, is due to our inability to remain stable and awake within that nature. But instead our minds are constantly involved with grasping, are constantly involved with the process of conceptualization and therefore judgment, are constantly involved with pridefulness, in which we constantly reaffirm our ego by defining what we know and how we're doing and where we're at. And so we never see the truth. We have no space in our mind. We are constantly wrapping the package of self and defining its parameters. Since this is the case, even if it were possible for some great bodhisattva to walk up to sentient beings and say, this is the secret, this is it. First of all, the karma for that event is not there. It's simply not there. The connection with one's enlightenment, in one sense, is already established in that one's nature is the Buddha nature. Yet one has not created the causes to view that nature. One has not overcome hatred, greed, and ignorance yet. So the karma is not there. The habitual tendency to react in certain ways is also firmly established since we've been doing this since time out of mind. Therefore, if we were to hear some great, fantastic secret about the nature of mind, we would habitually react in a certain way. Our minds would close. We would be busy with the reactive process. Our perception would be diluted, and we could not understand. Furthermore, our minds are shallow, and we're hard We don't realize that about ourselves. We try to act very sweet and kind because we saw somebody sweet and kind on TV and it looked good. Or maybe our mothers and fathers have told us that we should be nice. Or we've heard these kinds of things. Yet, where is our compassion? How much of our life is actually dedicated to really benefiting others, really benefiting them? Not just doing what makes us look like a proper wife or husband or mother or father or friend. How much of our life is really selfless activity? And so our minds, being hard as they are, deeply involved in the habitual tendency of ego clinging, if we were to hear the truth, it would be much like pouring milk into a bowl that's turned over. The milk would simply run off. And I describe that response that we have when our minds are hard like that as plinking. It reminds me of the sound that a drop of water might make on a pail that's turned over. It simply plinks. There's a shallowness, a tinniness about it. There's no depth. So even though that's what we yearn for, is to hear the secrets of the universe and to have some great nature of mind teaching and to be allowed to enter into the threshold of some crazy idea that we have about some one thing or another. Still, these things are not useful. But what is useful is to begin to transform our minds, because ultimately the process of enlightenment, or the state of enlightenment, the awakening, really comes about through the activity of the path. Yes, our nature is inherently that of the Buddha, but that nature is not seen by us. We are not able to remain stable within that awareness, not even for a moment. Our minds are so tight. And while that is our potential, it's like in a seed form, hard and green. And while the goal is the awakening to that very same state, and so it is true in one way that there's really no movement, that one awakens to what is already so. There's no going or coming involved in that process. Still, the path, while ultimately being understood as indistinguishable from the basis for study, the basis for enlightenment, and the result of enlightenment, the path itself is a necessary process. And without the path, there is no good result. We must create the causes by which we will achieve realization. By understanding the importance and the relevance of this, we have to come down to a point at which we really look ourselves square in the eye in some real way and determine for ourselves exactly where we're at. What are we really up to? Because if we don't spend enough time cultivating pure intention, there is a tremendous obstacle that arises. We go right into practice, say. We go right into trying to get the deeper teachings. We go right into looking like a practitioner. I've had people time and time again, and the people that have been here for a long time can attest to this, that students time and time again have come in and quickly picked up the Dharma rap, quickly dressed up like Dharma people, bought themselves a mala and learned how to wiggle their fingers in order to look like they're really using it. And they immediately start dressing the part and looking the part and acting the part and smelling the part and rolling their eyes ever skyward, looking sinless, or whatever it is that people look when they roll their eyes skyward. Constipated, perhaps. And what happens there, what clearly is happening there, is that they haven't spent enough time with themselves. They have immediately entered into a game, into an event, into a movement, that they haven't taken the time to understand. Because before you do that, there's a very real period at which you have to look at yourself square in the eye and say, am I being real about this? What's the point here? What am I doing? Do I want to go from being what? What were you being before? A business person, or a happy-go-lucky person, or I don't know, what were we? Beach bunnies, or name your game. Whatever it was you were before. Am I simply going from being that to being this? If we do that, what we have actually done is to simply change clothes, to simply change our game. We haven't really understood what the point is. What can the result of that be? Think for yourself. I'm sure you can answer it. There's no practice. The practice is very superficial. It's just it's really a very materialistic activity. One is actually doing something to be a certain way. One is redefining one's ego in a different way. We should have spent some time understanding what our intention is. What is the intention? Is it to live a spiritual life? Is it to be a good person? Is it to be spiritual? Is it to be good rather than bad? It's none of these. These are very poor reasons for dedicating one's life to practice. One has to understand the real point of practice. The real point of practice is that one has looked around and one has seen that there is suffering. You have to know that. Time and time again, I've given this teaching, and Americans have such a hard time with that. Why? Because we have such a pridefulness about what we can do. And especially here in the New Age, it's become very popular. Now, if you think positive thoughts, you can live a good life. And there's all kinds of crazy ideas going around. Like, for instance, if you don't think old, you won't age. Unfortunately, no one's lived long enough to prove that that's true. Or if you don't think about death, you'll live forever. Give me a break. The person who thought of that is probably dead now. These things they're faulty thinking. We should look around and see that cyclic existence has, especially for humans, has, according to the Buddha, has three basic sufferings, three basic faults: old age, sickness, and death. No one has beat it yet. Never. There have been stories of enlightened Buddhas who have lived for a very long time, and there are even stories of Buddhas who have lived far beyond the lifespan of human beings, and then when they left, didn't really die. These are wonderful stories, and do you know why they're possibly true? They're possibly true because those Buddhas, being Buddhas, are really not in cyclic existence. They have overcome cyclic existence. They are pure emanations of a purely enlightened state, and not hooked into what human beings are hooked into. So the goal then becomes obvious. One should reach very strongly for enlightenment as the cessation to these sufferings. So we have to begin by really thinking about these things. What is the goal? Is the goal to be a practitioner, or is the goal to practice until we reach enlightenment? There's a difference. And it makes a difference in your practice, because if all you want to do is be a practitioner, you can buy yourself a chuba, or you can even get some robes. You can get ordained. And perhaps you can get yourself a mala, and you can learn all the right words. I have students come through here all the time that know all the right words. They know more words than I do. Really impressive to some people. And you can do all of those things, but you can never look yourself square in the eye, perhaps, and say, it isn't good enough. It isn't enough what I'm doing. I have allowed myself to remain involved in habitual tendencies and have not fought to overcome them. I know fancy words, yes, but I'm prideful about them, and I use them to my advantage. How unfortunate. I dress up like a Dharma practitioner and do my practice, yet my mind is unstable. Within my practice time, I don't really try to achieve the optimum result. I don't really think of the importance of allowing my mind to remain stable and spacious. I simply do what I do. And there are people that dress up like Dharma practitioners, and they have some practice that they do every day, and then they can say to others, I'm a Dharma practitioner. But they don't continue, they don't persevere. Their goal, obviously, judging from that, is to simply do some practice. We have to determine for ourselves what the goal is. And then determining for ourselves what the goal is, if the goal is really enlightenment, we have to study and understand what the causes of enlightenment are. What is this purification of the mind stream? What is it? According to the Buddha, we must purify our minds from hatred, greed, and ignorance. These are habitual tendencies that we have been participating in for lifetime after lifetime, since time out of mind, endless stream of lifetimes. And so, in order to achieve the optimum result, which is to realize the primordial wisdom state, to awaken to that nature, we must purify our minds of hatred, greed, and ignorance, and the mother of those, which is desire and ego clinging. Those are the mother and father, actually, of these: hatred, greed, and ignorance. Yet, and here's the bottom line, and here's what this teaching is really about. We allow ourselves to remain Dharma practitioners who are filled with anger. We allow ourselves to remain Dharma practitioners with our mind streams chock full of jealousy. We allow ourselves to remain practitioners whose minds are obsessed with competition, with being better than someone else, or with the fact that someone else is better than us. We allow our minds to be filled and obsessed with the kinds of conceptual experience and the exaggeration of that conceptual experience that can only lead to a lack of stability within one's mind stream. We allow ourselves to remain like that. And on top of it all, the piece of cake is that we allow ourselves to remain arrogant about our spiritual position. What can we think that we might have attained through that? What can the result possibly be? That for a short period of time, because you know some words, or because you're in the right place at the right time, or because you're wearing some special clothing, or because you know how to use a mala, that you might perhaps be on top of the heap? For how long? What did it really buy you? In the end, the cause always is directly related to the result. if our intention is pure, if what we wish to do is to truly liberate our minds from these things which we know to be causes of suffering, and we work tremendously hard to achieve that, if we, upon viewing ourselves courageously, see that there is hatred in our mind streams, or see that there is jealousy, or see that there is the tendency to make crazy exaggerations and crazy conceptualizations and crazy obscurations thereby, then if what we really want to do is to awaken to the primordial wisdom nature, to achieve Buddhahood, we won't waste a moment going after these things like a warrior. In a very courageous and strong way, not resting until they have been purified. And you think of the great saints, like the one that was mentioned today, Milarepa, knowing that he had so much to overcome. He went after his ego clinging like a warrior, constantly making offerings, never doing anything but making offerings. At the cost of his own physical well-being, he constantly did mandala offering. And in order to do that, he made mandalas on top of a hard stone, a stone that was very rough. You know what stones feel like. And for years, he constantly made mandala offerings by brushing the stone clean with his forearm, till the flesh was eaten away and there was nothing but bone. But he achieved enlightenment. I'm not recommending that you run around removing the flesh from your bones. It's up to you what you do. But I am recommending that we look ourselves straight in the eye and really get the big picture. What's there? What are you doing? What is your goal? Are you really just shoveling samsara around? Moving it from place to place, like a child playing blocks? Leaving the building blocks for your suffering intact? Or are you really serious about this, no matter what your game is? Have you looked yourself in the eye and understood what the goal is, and understood what you're really up against? Do you let yourself get away with arrogance? Do you let yourself get away with ego clinging? Do you let yourself get away with jealousy? The person who has not spent enough time purifying their intention can very easily use Dharma or any other spiritual science as the worst trap there is, the worst poison there is. Because the whole time you are consuming that, you are using the Dharma practice as a poison that continues your delusion. You are constantly reinforcing your idea of self-nature and moving further and further from the perception of the pure luminosity that is the true nature. This time of discovering your intention and of purifying your intention and of spending time with yourself is so important. Cannot be spoken of enough. I have nothing but the greatest respect for a student who spends a great deal of time on that, takes their time. You shouldn't be afraid to do that. You shouldn't think that you should start making the proper noises immediately or start acting in a certain way immediately. The analogy that I try to give new students is this, and old students as well, is this. Don't bother burning hot and fast like paper. Paper burns out quickly and provides very little heat. Don't burn like wood, like softwood, and don't burn like hardwood. Burn like coal. No big deal, no big flamboyant flame, but it burns hot and long, and it will sustain you. And the way to provide that means by which you can burn like coal, that kind of stability, is through constantly at the beginning, at the middle, and even at the advanced stages of your practice, to evaluate your intention. Do not be the practitioner who will sit on their cushion and look ever so pure and allow their minds to be filled with jealousy and never question themselves. To allow their minds to be habitually involved in hatred or grasping or desire and never question themselves. Ask yourself again and again and again, this activity that is within my mind stream, what can it produce? What is it going to produce? And ask yourself if you want to eat that fruit. Because you will. Believe me, you will. And if it's good fruit, it will lead you closer to enlightenment. If it's bad fruit, it is a poison that will take you nowhere but down. There are, in closing, many people who have such strong habitual tendencies that they cannot make a decision to simply stop. Their jealousy is a compulsive thing, for instance. They have very strong habitual compulsions. And there are other people who can just shake themselves up and say, cut that out. You know that produces no good result. What kind of person are you? If you are the second kind of person, your job is relatively easy, although there will be times when your activity will be compulsive. It's always true. There is no human being that is free of compulsion. Compulsion is the definition of cyclic existence. It is the hallmark of cyclic existence. You will be engaged in things that you simply cannot help. So it seems. But while you can, and in whatever way you can, make your decision. Be firm and courageous. Look yourself square in the eye, and don't wait for someone else to clean up your mess, because that will never happen. But if you find that you are locked into compulsion, and you cannot help yourself, you are still not exempt from making the decision to purify your mind stream at every moment. You must look at that compulsion and know that this is not bringing you any benefit. And at that point, you should use whatever means are at your disposal to help yourself. In the Dharma community, we teach that the best means to help yourself is practice, and that practice must be preceded by pure intention. One should go to one's guru and ask, what is the best practice? What is the best inner posture to take in order to overcome these particular obstacles? And then one should do that faithfully, but one should not do that simply to be going through the motions. It reminds me of exercise, for instance. There are exercises in which, since I enjoy exercise, I can speak from that experience. There are certain movements that one can do, that one can go through the motion. One can, for instance, flex the muscle in the arm, can go through the motion, and you've gone through the motion. You've completed that motion. You can do 12 of those. You've done that 12 repetitions of that exercise. But there is another way in which you can do that, where you can apply some weight, and you can get serious, and you can concentrate on that muscle and exactly what you want, and concentrate on exactly the beginning of that muscle and the end of that muscle, and you can think about it. And you can create the optimum contraction in that muscle, even though it burns, even though it's uncomfortable. You can create that, because what you want to do is to strengthen that muscle. You don't want to just go through the motions. So that's the posture that one should take if one is really seriously taking care of oneself. Ultimately, again in closing, there is no one that will reach enlightenment for you. No one can bestow it on you. Even the Buddha, even with the miraculous stories of his teaching that immediately gave him arhathood to some of his students, it was their responsibility to accept the teaching purely. It was their responsibility, it was their mind stream that they were responsible for. And it was their previous karma that they had purified. And so it is with us. No one can bestow enlightenment on us, which is good, because that means no one can keep us from it either. No one is ever to blame for your condition. And no one has the power to take your Buddhahood away from you. Then be responsible. Then spend lots of time on your intention. Don't think of it as a baby practice. Think of it as the most advanced practice. I've seen with disappointment many students who are so proud because they have received some Dzogchen teaching. And they have not for one moment considered their intention. And not been responsible to themselves or for themselves at all. It will never bring good result. And I hope that for you, there will be the most excellent result. That's possible. That's possible because you can make it so.
Thank you so much for joining with us today, and we're really happy to have you here. Let me see where I am. I want to let you know a little bit about what's going on here at Kunsampai Choling, and let you know that starting next week, we're going to have a slightly, a different schedule on Sundays, and that will include Jetsunma's teachings at 10 a.m. instead of 11. So next week, this is Eastern time, we'll work this at 1 hour earlier than it has been. So come and join us 1 hour earlier. We'll have her teachings at 10, and then at 11:30, we will begin a kind of a short program with Kempo Tenzin Karze that's open to the public for any age, and it includes basically a short meditation, teaching and Q&A, and then a Chinrezi practice, sort of a taste of Kunsang Payo Choling, what we do here, but also sort of a taste of how you move into a Dharma practice. So hope you join us for that. You can take a short break after Jetsunma's teaching and then come on back for Kempo. And the meditation that we've usually had on Saturdays and Sundays at 10 will happen at Saturdays at 10, and Sundays will then, as we said, be Kempo doing the meditation at probably about noon. And oh no, I'm sorry, did I do that wrong? 11:30, and then the teaching follows it. I think I've got that right. So anyway, come join us. And meanwhile, we continue with the Medicine Buddhas on Facebook at 5:30 p.m. And soaks are now in the evening for right now at 7 p.m. And we're doing some pretty intense soaks. Soak is a food offering ceremony, and it brings about a tremendous amount of merit and therefore a lot of power to bring about change. So thinking that we'd like to bring about some positive change for most of the people around the world, we're doing it at 7 every evening at 7 p.m. Join us on Zoom. If you go on our calendar on tara.org, which is our website, you can just search for the calendar, or you can scroll down on the front page, and at the bottom there's a quick link to it. It'll say I'll think of what it'll say, but it will be the page that shows you what video is happening at that time, but also the calendar. And you can click on the calendar on any event, and it will give you where is it being shown and how to get there. And so if there's any links involved. So yeah, let us know. I mean, just come on by. So, and also on the come on by roll, come on over to KPC. We would love to see you in between these colossal rainstorms and snowstorms and crazy weather. We'd love to have you come and relax here by Jetsunma's new koi pond, or by any of the statues or stupas, or any of the places you can walk to across the street and on this side. You can come visit the animals. You can come check out the garden. There's a lot of things to do. And the prayer room, of course, open is 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And outside is open dawn to dusk, since that changes. And we're happy to have you. And we hope to see you soon. So that's my spiel for the day. Come on by, and meanwhile, have a good week, and hope you practice, and hope this has helped. Thanks so much.